Good evening. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting for July 5th, 2022. Ms. Hilbrick, will you please call roll?
Councilman De La Garza?
I am present.
Councilwoman Solis?
Here.
Councilman Crocker?
Here.
Councilwoman Scott?
Here.
Councilman Lofgren?
Here.
And Mayor Bauknight.
Here.
I do not see Mayor Pro Tem Young in attendance tonight.
All right, if everybody please stand for the pledges, followed by a moment of silence. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. On the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you. Mr. Garza, do you have any announcements and/or reminders tonight?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I do not.
Public and employee recognitions then.
First item is Parks and Recreation Month proclamation. April?
Yes, sir. Whereas Parks and Recreation is an integral part of the communities throughout the country, including Victoria, Texas. Whereas Parks and Recreation promotes health and wellness, improving the physical and mental health of people who live near parks. And whereas Parks and Recreation promotes time spent in nature, which positively impacts mental health by increasing cognitive performance and well-being and alleviating illnesses such as depression, attention deficit disorders, and Alzheimer's. Whereas Parks and Recreation encourages physical activities by providing space for popular sports, hiking trails, and many other activities designed to promote active lifestyles. And whereas Parks and Recreation programming and education activities such as youth sports and environmental education are critical to childhood development. And whereas Parks and Recreation increases a community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of local tax base, increased tourism and the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. Whereas Parks and Recreation is a fundamental environmental well-being of our community. And whereas Parks and Recreation is essential to the adaptable infrastructure that makes our communities resilient in the face of natural disasters and climate change. And whereas Parks and natural recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our community and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors. And whereas U.S. House of Representatives has designated July as Parks and Recreation Month, and whereas the City of Victoria recognizes the benefits derived from parks and recreation resources, now therefore I, Jeff Bauknight, Mayor of the City of Victoria, Texas, do officially declare the month of July to be recognized as Parks and Recreation Month in Victoria, Texas.
Well, thank you very much, Mayor and Council. Have a lot going on for the July. America has recognized Parks and Recreation Month since 1985. We started off with the challenged athletes. They had a softball tournament this past weekend, and of course the 4th of July. That kind of kicked off the July with a bang. We've got a lot of stuff going on in the Recreation Division to help us out, so stay tuned on social media. Thank you.
Thank you. Next one is July 2022 Keep Victoria Beautiful Beautification Award. Ms. Youker.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. We are here to announce our July Business Beautification Award winner. But before I do that, I wanted to make a quick announcement of a program we've been talking about launching, and we have launched, which is our Beautification Grant Program. So not only do we give awards, but now we're going to give some money. So these are thanks to raised sponsorships and grants, such as from HEB and Lyondell-Bazell, that we're able to offer anywhere from $100 to $500 to more to not just businesses, but it could be a nonprofit, a church, a school that wants to do a little bit of work to improve their landscaping, maybe some painting, a small project. So we are accepting applications now, so anyone can go to keepvictoriabeautiful.org and apply for those grants. And now I'm going to ask Meredith Bird, our chairperson of Keep Victoria Beautiful, to come up and do our award winner.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. On behalf of Keep Victoria Beautiful, I'm thrilled to present our Business Beautification Award for the month of July to Vitality Court Senior Living. As you might remember, Victoria residents are invited to submit their nominations on the Keep Victoria Beautiful website, and our award committee visits each nominated business and gives them a score based on predetermined criteria, including the building upkeep, absence of litter, and well-maintained grass or landscaping. Vitality Court is a large property of approximately 98 units at the corner of Airline and John Stockbauer. They have gorgeous, well-kept buildings with an inviting entrance, colorful landscaping, and nicely maintained green spaces. Their commitment to aesthetics is evident and requires a lot of hard work to maintain, and so I hope the council will join me in congratulating Vitality Court Senior Living as our July Business Beautification Award winner.
Thank you so much for the award, Mr. Mayor and council members. On behalf of Vitality Court Senior Living, I humbly accept this award, and we are going to strive to maintain the very much hard work that got us this award in the first place. I know there's a lot that goes into running a city, but it's really nice to know that there is part of the city like Keep Victoria Beautiful that recognizes the aesthetics that goes into making Victoria a great place to be. So on behalf of Vitality, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Ort. All right, with that, we'll go to items from council.
I have one item. I know that the Parks and Recreation is working on their policy on the community center. I had not a discussion, but anyway, Our Lady of Sorrows does the Jamaica the first week in August every year. When I went to go pay for this year's Jamaica, I said, okay, can I go ahead and book the Jamaica for next year? And they said, no, ma'am, you can't. And I said, why not? And they said, because y'all canceled in 2017, which is 5 years ago, and they said we were going to have to wait another 5 years before we could schedule like 2 years in advance, like this year for next year, until after the Jamaica, which means that somebody else could come in and take that first week in August that we've had for years and years and years. It just so happened that in 2017, we had new administration that decided to change it and not use the community center. It was just a test, but we're being penalized for 10 years. And I don't think that's fair. And I think that, I know they're working on the policy, and I think that should be looked at real carefully, because 5 years already, and then we still have to wait 5 more years. I don't think that's fair. Thank you.
Anybody else? Items from council? I have one. Deals with the continued jaywalking to the HEB on Rio Grande. I was hopeful that it would stop once we spent the money and partnered with TxDOT and HEB. But we know there's a fence that's needed behind Jack in the Box. I don't know if they don't want to help out with safety, and they want to see it as a cut-through, make it easy for people to get to Jack in the Box. But I please ask, Chief, if you could, whenever a police officer drives by there and they see someone jaywalking, ticket them. No warnings, just give them a ticket. It's the only way it's going to stop if Jack in the Box isn't going to put up that fence, and we spent $1 million from our budget as part of the improvements over there, so.
Can I piggyback on that?
Yes, sir.
I was informed that the fence was going up as soon as the light was finished.
That was what we were
Because
told.
I've asked several times about the light, but the light's finished, correct? Mm-hmm. So who's responsible for the fence?
They are.
Who is they?
Jack in the Box.
Okay, I was informed that as soon as the light was finished, that the fence would go up.
Yeah, we're having issues with Jack in the Box management to put the fence up. And I was just told that we're going a municipal court route in order to require them to put the fence.
Good move. Thank you.
Thanks. All right. Is that it from everybody? All right. Citizens communication then, Mr. Von der Rohe.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. I was watching the budget a few days ago, and everyone's getting raises, but the city council isn't getting any raises and stuff. And, you know, it's hard to make it on $3,000 a year, and the city council, they have to get other jobs just to make it ends meet. And I was thinking, why couldn't they get a $20 on-time appearance bonus for each meeting, and the city mayor get $25. And a lot of times people are late because they have to get a snack or something to eat before the meeting and stuff. And I was thinking maybe someone could cater some food to the city council, you know, and, you know, give them something to do, because these meetings, sometimes they get awfully boring and stuff, you know, and sometimes you just want to take a break. Of course, you can't say that because you're highly trained professionals, you know. And I think that would be a good idea. We've had things where I've worked where you get $1 an hour extra if you come to work on time, you know, because there's people, and I think that would be reasonable, a $20 bonus for coming to work on time, and then $25 for the mayor, because, you know, it's not like the mayor's making $100,000 a year like in the big cities, you know. And this is Victoria. A lot of people don't know that. They think everyone's just rolling in the dough and stuff. And the fire department and the municipal court and the police department, they're all certified in putting car seats in to do it properly. But I figured out how to do it because my son told me how. That was the way I figured it out. But thanks, and have a good evening. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Mrs. Lynette Zeller.
Hi, Council, Mayor. My name is Lynette Zeller. I want to appeal to your sense of decency, common sense, and the fact that you are leaders in our community with the ability to steer policy. Since the beginning of time, the family, consisting of a mother and a father, has been the basic foundation of society. And children raised in these traditional families generally flourish best. The family with a mother and a father was the first institution God created. When the family is not doing well, the nation as a whole suffers. When the family unit is eroded, the nation begins to crumble. Why do I say this? In 1963, on the floor of the United States Congress, was entered into the congressional record a speech which listed 45 things the enemies of our nation wanted to see accomplished in order to achieve the destruction of America. Number 24 was eliminate the laws governing obscenity by calling them censorship and a violation of free speech and press. Number 25 was break down cultural standards of morality by promoting pornography and obscenity. Number 26, present homosexuality, degeneracy, and promiscuity as normal, natural, and healthy. 90% of these things have been accomplished. And I want to ask, is America better off now? I speak for many when I say we don't want to be a community where our children are groomed at an early age for sex, or young people are confused about their sexual identity, or where drag queens flaunt their debauchery in front of children under the guise of education and entertainment. So where does it end? And why? Why is there this enormous explosion in transgender ideology? In an article in The Federalist by Jennifer Bilk, she is able to connect the dots. The transgender lobby and various organizations are being funded by several billionaires, many gay and transgender themselves, George Soros, Tim Gill, to just name a few, who, with their vast wealth, are able to exert immense cultural influence. There is an explosion of medical and pharmaceutical There is an explosion in the medical and pharmaceutical industry in which these individuals stand to gain untold billions in new procedures like phalloplasty, vaginoplasty, facial feminization, urethral procedures, puberty blockers, hormone replacement, womb implants, and transplants, and the list goes on and on. It's important to note that once you have a transgender patient, you have a patient for life. It's both evil and lucrative. Those investing in the medical infrastructure stand to greatly profit off the confusion and suffering of its victims. What the perpetrators don't tell you is that the suicide rate 10 years down the road is off the charts for these patients, or that many of the side effects of hormone therapy are irreversible, or that puberty blockers can cause early onset of osteoporosis. Lupron given to confused children is the same
Zeller,
drug.
Can you wrap it up in just about 10 seconds?
Oh, I didn't even realize. I'm so engrossed in, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's okay.
Lupron is used to chemically castrate sex offenders. The head of the American Library Association is avowed Marxist with an agenda. Our children deserve better. We can stop the insidious indoctrination beginning with our local library. Please be courageous and do the right thing. Thank you.
Ms. Zeller. Ms. Patek.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, greetings. Thank you for caring about protecting the children in our community with age and content appropriate books purchased with our taxpayer dollars. In a letter I recently received, the writer talked about how the family serves as the ground floor, the foundation on which everything else sits. If its enemies undermine or weaken this basic unit of society, the entire superstructure can be brought down. Right now, our public library has sexually explicit books and gender ideology books that are age and content inappropriate for minors. These books will drive a wedge between parent and child and therefore undermines the family unit. Most parents are completely unaware or don't understand the process in which is being pushed by the transgender agenda. In my research, I have learned about the cognitive stages of development in the formative years. Most children, by the age of 3, can correctly say they are a boy or a girl. It is not until age 5 that most children understand that girls become women and boys become men. It's not until age 7 that kids understand that if a man gets dressed up like a woman and puts on makeup, he is still a man. So, children age 7 or younger may believe that drag queens really do turn into women. They don't understand that sex is permanent. Why? Because their thinking and feelings develop over time as a result of learning. Children are impressionable. We need to be teaching the truth with good books. Our library introduces ideas about human sexuality to our innocent children. Does that make sense? Some of these children don't even know the alphabet yet or how to cross the street safely. They also have no need to know what mommies and daddies do at night. Some of these books tell them that if you're a boy and feel like a girl, then you can be a girl, or vice versa. All you need to do is take hormone blockers, then cross-sex hormones. No one is telling them that they have to take them for the rest of their lives and that they will become a permanent medical patient. No one is telling them that their suicidality rate will go up if they have a sex reassignment surgery. No one is telling them that they are not really going to solve any of their problems by doing this. They are just being encouraged to take hormone blockers, which many times are given on the first visit with a doctor. No one is telling them that there is a good chance that they will become sterile and never be able to have children. No one is taking the time to ask them about the trauma that they may have experienced that caused this shift in their thinking. We have a responsibility to provide the children the truth, not lies. Introducing ideology to young and vulnerable minds is called indoctrination. We need to remove age and content inappropriate books from our public library and develop a child's collection policy that will keep the books out. You are the gatekeepers. You have the opportunity and the responsibility to protect the innocence of children with our taxpayer dollars. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right, at this time, we're going to close citizens' communication and go to items with a public hearing.
Item C1 is an ordinance amending Chapter 15 of the Victoria City Code pertaining to the purchase of catalytic converters. This item is currently on second and third reading.
Thank you. And for this one, I know it said second and third in the meeting agenda, but this is just going to be the second reading.
Okay, did anybody have any questions from the last meeting? Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
One question I had, just to follow up on a comment I made the last time, dealt with the verification by the repair facilities. Had discussions with different folks, including the city attorney, about, what that looks like. And one of the things that we talked about was a line of communication between the PD and these metal recyclers in terms of, hey, here's what we're looking for when we're looking for verification. I wanted to know, kind of get your thoughts on how can we do that? What does that look like?
We have
is that viable?
Chief Arredondo has a trip scheduled for this week to go to, I think it's San Marcos, to talk to a recycle facilitator to determine their process and the actual ins and outs of it. But what we've done, though, is in the original presentation, it included the automotive repair facilities, but it didn't actually address the individual sellers, which is what you have in front of you. That's section 2 on page 2. It talks about the person attempting to sell a catalytic converter must reply and must present to the metal recycling entity, basically the fact that they have supporting documentation to actually possess that catalytic converter. So it basically says year, make, model of the vehicle, identification number of the vehicle from which the converter was removed, a copy of the certificate of title or other documentation indicating that the person actually has ownership interest in the actual catalytic converter that they're trying to remove and try to cash in. And then we did make one additional under 1562. It basically says it in just pretty point blank. It says it will be unlawful for any individual or entity other than a metal recycler to possess a used catalytic converter that was cut from its original vehicle unless the individual or entity provides applicable information under the subsections. So the ordinance for the metal recycler is governed under state law, state mandate. The main thing we're looking for here again is to give a little bit of credence and a little bit of a tool to the patrol officer that comes across somebody that has a cut converter, which is basically spelled out in 1562A.
Right. No, I think this is a much better version. I appreciate the work on it.
Yes, sir.
And definitely, I think inclusion of the individuals in there was important because it took it beyond just the recyclers themselves. So,
Absolutely.
No, I think that was a good addition.
So, Councilman, to go back to your previous question, Deputy Chief Young and I did have a discussion today about, I know there's some concern in terms of, well, how do they know that if it's an established business? And we did discuss the fact that it is going to be up to the officers and the business to basically work together. Did they have a certificate of occupancy? Have you done the research on them to make sure? Because we felt like putting that into the ordinance as basically a checklist might not necessarily look the same for each business that they have to go to.
Sure.
But that as long as they can communicate with the businesses that they're going to check out, that here's the things we're looking for. And there should be, one of those things that they can provide that shows that they've done the research to make sure that it's an established business, as well as making sure that they're open to the public for business was something that was big for us, because that meant to us, they're going to know if this is a backyard facility, right? Or someone working out of their garage, and open to the public is gonna mean a commercial building, something that's open, brick and mortar, that sort of facility. So it will be up to the officers to a certain degree, but we've discussed them having the communication with the businesses that they're visiting and asking for those things.
Yeah, and I think that communication is a huge key component to that, because the legitimate businesses are gonna get that communication, know what's expected of them.
That's right.
And, you know, if we can do that and just say, hey, here's the expectations, I think that's great. I
And
think
there's
that'll help a
ordinances,
bunch.
there's ordinances that are in place. House Bill 4110 helped with that. Plus I mean, if you look at the occupation code, it's 43 pages long. So the hoops and loops that the recyclers are going to have to go through is contained in 43 pages of document. So sidebar, we were able to apprehend 3 people just this past week with several catalytic converters. One of the citizens called in and said that they had some information on what they observed. They called the police. We were able to catch up with them in time and made an arrest of 3 individuals with a bunch of catalytic converters. So, and they were from Houston.
Good job with that. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Any other questions?
No, sir.
Thank you.
Okay, at this time,
I have a question before we start, and it's really a question for you. It's a point of order. I know that I don't disagree with making this be the second reading, but from our earlier discussion, is that something the mayor can do unilaterally, or does the council have to reach an agreement to break it into second and third?
If it's written that it's a second and third reading, we would have to decide, I would think. If it's written in this ordinance as a second and third reading, then we as a council would have to decide if we want to go with third reading.
And I felt like we should do that
would think.
before we call the public hearing, since we would be having a public hearing according to the agenda on the second and third reading, but we want to split it into second.
In the past, we have voted on the splitting of the second and third reading as a council,
Okay.
so we can go ahead and do that.
all right.
I don't disagree with you, but
No, procedure's great. I like it. Thank you.
So do we have to make a motion to go ahead and do that?
Split it.
yes, to split
So I
it.
make such a motion.
I'll second that.
All right, a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Thank you, Ms. Scott, for keeping it straight.
You're welcome. It was your role. I've taken it over.
Okay, at this time, we're open a public hearing for item C1. Anybody wishing to speak on this item, please step forward. Seeing no one get up and come to the microphone, we will close the public hearing and entertain any motions.
So move.
So you're moving to adopt the passed out version?
Version as a second reading.
Okay, as the second reading.
A second.
Okay, thank you. Motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on it? Sounds like we can't pass this fast enough. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Thank you. Consent agenda.
Okay. Item C1 is the adoption of minutes of the regular meeting of June 21st, 2022, the special meeting of June 27th, 2022, and a special meeting on June 28th, 2022. Item C2 is an ordinance, or I'm sorry, D2 is an ordinance approving a budget amendment to FY22 budget in the amount of $112,516.67 to replace damaged or missing medical equipment and supplies. This item is also on second and third reading. Item D3 is a resolution approving a consulting services agreement with Cambridge Systematics Incorporated for the development of the Victoria NPO's 2050 socioeconomic forecast for the travel demand model revisions in the amount of $75,000. Item D4 is a resolution approving a variance to Section 5-149A1 and Section 5-152B1H for the property located at 9009 North Navarro Street in order to allow for the approval to erect an off-premises multi-tenant freestanding pylon sign.
I move we adopt. Consent agenda is read.
A second.
Got a motion and second on the consent agenda. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. The motion carries to pass it. And on to action items, E1.
Item E1 is a resolution approving a real estate sales contract for the sale of 1.620 acres on Kerr Boulevard for $210,000.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I don't have a presentation for this action item, but happy to answer any questions that you might have. As we did include some information in the memo on this item, just to serve as a refresher that this is the 1.62 acres the city purchased in 2016 for potential relocation of Fire Station 5. And upon further just due diligence, it's a site that we no longer need for that. And so we, per that original agreement, offered the property back to the original owner at an appraised value of $210,000, and they've accepted.
All right.
I move we accept item E1.
I'll second.
All right, we got a motion and a second on item E1 to approve it. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Item E2.
Item E2 is a resolution approving a real estate sales contract for the purchase of 32 acres on North Main Street for $750,000.
All right, I do have a short hour-long presentation for this update because, you know, we can't get out of here by 6.
Watch me.
Yeah. No, I'm just kidding. So just, you've seen most of these slides, but we typically have gone through them either in our meetings or at our quarterly workshops at the community center. And obviously this is a big action towards this project. And so I think it's important to revisit a few of these slides for the general public that tune into our regular meeting. But really briefly, you know, a lot of this stems from the fact that our existing public safety facilities are inadequate, unsafe, decentralized, and dated. And this is something that the city has known for a while, and consequently back in 2017, the city hired Dewberry Architects at the time to conduct a spatial analysis of just the existing needs, spatial analysis of just current staff, spatial needs for the future, and they developed a site and program recommendation at the time. You can see by the picture on the left that that original building was put up in 1966, I think that's what it says. And I think the last time I checked back then, we had how many officers? Do you remember that? Pop quiz?
He was kind of young back then.
Yeah, it was her first day on the job. Needless to say, staff 50, right? 50, yeah. But in any case, needless to say, staff has obviously outgrown the space. You've seen it, right? They've taken over space at City Hall, which has caused departments to leave City Hall to go to 700 Main, right? But ultimately, they're still running out of space. This is just an image kind of just showing where all the public safety related facilities are, minus the fire stations. But this gives you a sense of where, for example, the fire marshal's office is, fire administration. PD has a couple of presences, of course, at our headquarters here on site on this campus, but also at the mall. You can see where fire department has some storage areas, of course, where the drill field is, 911 communications, and where the shooting range is. Now, the objective of this exercise isn't to consolidate all of these, but nonetheless, it gives you a sense of just how spread out some of these operations are, and gives you a sense that combining 3 or 4 of these would bring some good synergy and efficiencies. So back in 2018, they did anticipate bringing a lot of those different areas into one campus, and they proposed a 4-building campus, which you see here on the right-hand side, that included an indoor gun range, a training building, the headquarters, and storage space in order to consolidate a lot of those facilities and uses that I showed you in the previous slide. At the time, and these of course are not numbers adjusted for inflation or anything, but at the time, back in 2018, they recommended that the total cost of construction for those 4 buildings would total over $53 million, which is a lot of money. And so what the city did with that was slowly but surely start working in that direction. So that later that same year, the city purchased 25 acres off Ben Jordan. You may recall that. The intention was never to develop all 25 acres, and so the city very quickly started advertising for the sale of 10 acres out of the 25 with the intention of keeping 15 for that campus that I just showed you. But other than purchasing the property, there really was never any adequate planning or inclusion in any of the CIP conversations that had taken place ever since then. And of course, after 3 years ago, when the administration shift happened here, we really reassessed everything, went back and looked at the study, realized that this site off of Ben Jordan was probably not a good use for this facility. We'd like to look at sites and think of them as what's the highest and best use. And it became very evident when we approached it from that perspective that because of the proximity to schools, trail network, and what's around it, it made sense for this land off of Ben Jordan to be some type of residential development. And so since then, we've actually sold off all 25 acres. We sold the 10 acres to Enchanted Gardens, which is gonna open up here in the next couple of months. And then the remaining 15 acres we just sold a few months ago to a residential developer that's currently building homes across the street on Ben Jordan. And they'll eventually take a phase over, jump the street, and pop up in those 15 acres. So we've done that, which leads us to what we did last year, which was a 2021 study update to that study from 2018. There were some missing elements from that 2018 study that I felt were important. And so it was important to take a fresh look. And there was a couple big changes that happened, obviously, since then. Obviously, the administration change that I mentioned at the city manager's office level, but even with the police department, we obviously brought in a new police chief, and it was important to include the new police chief in a new visioning process for the future of the police department. That original study also did not account for what happens with this space. And so for me, that was a big missing piece, right? You know, spend all this time talking about moving the police department, but spending zero time talking about what you do with the space that they vacated. You know, that to me wasn't sufficient planning that went into that exercise. And so this exercise last year included all of the departments that have a presence in what I'm calling the City Hall Complex site, which is the site that we're in now, which of course is the city manager's office, city attorney's office, city secretary's office, and municipal court, and had them go through a variety of different exercises similar to the police and fire department. And so that again included the spatial analysis, needs assessments, condition assessment of existing buildings, which also was not a part of that study in 2018. Part of this study also developed some options, and I'll share a couple of those with you. But before I share those couple of options, a couple of the results, and I know that this text is small, so I apologize for that. But in essence, on the police and 911 side, it in essence proposes a 90% increase in square footage space. So this tells us obviously that the square footage that they have now is just severely inadequate to the needs that they have. This takes into account a 20-year staff growth. I know that, Mayor, you asked a question at the last meeting around, you know, when was the last time we did a study? And there is a study that's gonna take a more specific look at that. But we followed a very specific model, which was the population model. And across the country, they typically use 1.6 to 2.6 per thousand folks in your community as a baseline. We chose a very conservative, very realistic number of 1.8, just shy of 2, because we knew that we wanted to be cognizant of just the reality of our growth of our community. You know, we're not seeing 10% growth, you know, every year like some communities are. And ultimately, we landed in coordination with the police department to 163 sworn officers over that 20-year period, which you can see is a 33 member increase in sworn officers, as well as additional civilian employees. So that if we were to implement that over a 20-year period, we could work our way backwards and develop a strategy around that. But nonetheless, those are the numbers that were used for this, because we want to make sure a facility is going to last us for several decades after it's constructed. But other issues that came around was, of course, secured parking. We have some real serious issues with lack of parking around our existing facility. Of course, dispatch is not located with patrol with the police department. There's not enough meeting rooms. If you've ever been into, and I hope you haven't, been into those interrogation rooms, they're very small. And so they're a little bit inadequate. And technology, of course, isn't what it needs to be. On the fire department side, not as much of an increase, because obviously when the fire department grows, they grow with fire stations. And so this only accounts just for the administration piece, but this shows you a 27% increase in the space needs that they have, as well as some minor growth in staff. Municipal court, which we're including in this facility, they'll see the most growth, which again just gives us a sense of just how inadequate the space that they use now is, just in terms of just the volume of the people that they serve, the volume of people that come when there's court. There's just so many different things that ideal court would have that our facility just doesn't have. And so obviously there's some ADA compliance issues there as well. Technology is a big part of it, and really just accounting for that future staff growth for that department as well. This simply just looks at some of the issues that they identified with the existing. As I mentioned earlier, that they looked at options as part of this study last year, and so they looked at the old Advocate building as an example, just to really look at what other buildings were downtown that could potentially house our public safety headquarters building. Ultimately, this facility didn't work. It just wasn't big enough. There wasn't parking, and it really wasn't going to address a lot of the issues that were identified through the process. We also looked at 700 Main, again, not big enough. And also, there were some parking limitations with this site as well. And so ultimately, what made sense was to look at a option that was centralized on an undeveloped tract of land, and this gives you a sense of just the size of it. More or less 68,000 square feet, two-story building in order to accommodate that growth and expansion that I mentioned, as well as those needs for those different departments. You can see just how many parking spaces a site like this accounts for. And compared to the one from 2018, it's only one building as opposed to four. So this version of the exercise doesn't combine as many sites as the first option in 2018. So for example, storage, we'll be working creatively with the fire department to identify some good storage areas with them. We have a vision for the drill site to potentially, through a grant of some kind, maybe grow that to be a training facility that can generate some money. And you heard Chief Fox recently talk about some opportunities in that area, but it makes sense to look at that drill site and potentially convert that into a public safety training site, not just for the fire department, and just take advantage of the fact that we own all that land behind that site. So that's sort of just another vision for a longer, I guess, period of time. But for now, we wanted to focus on the priority. 4 years ago, the priority phase one was an indoor gun range. That is not priority. The priority is the building for the personnel, for patrol, to really have the facilities that they deserve. So with that, you've seen these. This was last year's numbers. I'm sure these numbers will change. Derek and I actually had a conversation with the architect just a couple weeks ago, and they will be working on updating the cost estimates this summer, just so that we can have just a truer picture as to what this potentially might look like. But nonetheless, this gives you a sense of the fact that it would cost less than that close to $60 million facility that we would have to build if we went that route. And now more specific to the location, when we were looking around at different locations, we wanted to be cognizant of compatible uses in the area. Again, we didn't want to go right smack into what we would deem a residential area. We wanted to find a centralized area that took into account our new vision for growth. Previously, that site off of Ben Jordan was selected because of the fact that the city's position of growth at that point in time was very centered around growing to the north. And now we're trying to have better development balance, whether it's sort of on the loop going towards the airport. We're obviously focusing on the future I-69. We're obviously focusing on the southeast quadrant of our community as well. And so just our whole approach to development is a little bit more diverse in terms of where it happens, right? Infill, think of all the different initiatives that we're embarking on to have better development balance. And so again, the mindset then was just focused on the north. And so they picked a site that was more north. Again, we wanted to pick a site that was more centrally located so that it could access all parts of town, access to some major thoroughfares, close proximity to downtown, so that we can also leverage this as an employment hub to not completely take away the benefit of having these many people working close to downtown, whether it's for dining purposes or otherwise. And ultimately, we landed on this site. This had been a preferred site for a while, as you know, and we had to wait quite a while to wait for this property to become available. It is a 32-acre tract, but it's actually split up into two big tracts. And so the 14-acre tract that you see highlighted here on the screen is the one that is the most developable. You can see that it is close to the floodplain, but there is the site that is closest to, or the corner or quadrant of the site that is closest to, I guess, the Kubota dealership and Main Street, that is also at the highest elevation on that entire tract, which is where we would focus the building footprint on. And obviously with access to airline, it makes it an attractive location. The remaining 14 acres are mostly in the floodplain, and so those we would simply just keep as that. There might be an opportunity to incorporate them into some type of parks and recreation programming, whether it's a trail or whatever we end up doing as it relates to any potential expansion to the mobile home park that we have, or the RV park, sorry, that we have there. But anyway, one of the things that we know that is front and center is the fact that everybody is aware that there was fill that was brought into the site. So we hired Robert Kistner to do some geotechnical analysis. They had over a dozen borings done throughout this area. They did identify fill material. They didn't hit any debris, but obviously it's impossible to bore sample every inch of that site. And so we know that there's a potential for some remediation work on the site that might need to happen when the time comes. But quite frankly, for a facility this size, typically the foundation is designed in a way that it accounts for a lot of those issues. And so we don't have any major concerns around that part of it. And so consequently, we're bringing forward officially acquiring the acreage for $750,000. And this is a sense of the timeline. We do have in the CIP for next year the funds for the design. So we do anticipate as early as possible in October going into that design contract with the architect so that they can start a 9-month-long design process. Obviously, as we go through that design process, we'll start getting a better feel for cost estimates. We'll have to obviously potentially discuss phasing options and really just have all of those conversations during that design process. The idea is to finish that process come summertime of next year so that we can adequately fund the fiscal year 24 CIP edition with whatever approach we choose to embark on. And then obviously then construction starts and hopefully completed by summer of 2025.
Exciting.
It is. Finally.
Overdue.
Finally.
Yes.
Good.
Thank you, Mr. Garza. Does anybody want to make a motion?
I do. I'll make a motion that we buy the 32 acres for $750,000.
I'll second.
All right, got a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. That's passes. So no city manager reports, and we are going to recess for 5 minutes before our executive session.